Long before sunrise paints the skyline of New York, Al Roker wakes to a quiet ritual that few viewers of morning television will ever see, a ritual that has slowly become his shield against the invisible weight he carries home each day. The world knows him as the warm, steady presence on screen, but behind that familiar smile is a man who has spent decades absorbing the emotional residue of tragedies, storms, and human suffering. And it is in these early silent moments, before scripts, before cameras, before headlines, that he carefully rebuilds himself, piece by piece, beginning with a simple cup of coffee brewed just the way he likes it, the aroma grounding him in the present rather than the echoes of yesterday's stories, followed by a slow walk through his home, where the stillness acts almost like a reset button for his mind. And often, sitting nearby with her own morning calm, is Deborah Roberts, his wife, his quiet anchor in a profession that rarely allows emotional pause. They do not always speak much at that hour, and that silence is intentional, because both understand that words can wait, but peace cannot. And in that shared understanding lies one of the most powerful defenses against what psychologists call secondary traumatic stress, the accumulation of others' pain that slowly seeps into one's own life. Yet Al has never approached it clinically, instead shaping his own rituals over years of experience, trial, and quiet necessity, like stepping outside for a breath of cold air regardless of the season, letting the physical sensation remind him that he is here, alive, separate from the stories he tells. Or flipping through an old notebook where he has written small reminders to himself, "You are the messenger, not the burden bearer," a line he once scribbled after a particularly difficult broadcast. And though it may sound simple, it has become a kind of mantra that steadies him before each show. As the morning progresses, the world begins to wake, and with it the demands of his role. But even in the rush of preparation, reviewing scripts, coordinating with producers, adjusting to last-minute changes, there are small, almost invisible pauses he builds in. A deep breath before stepping onto the set, a brief closing of his eyes when the lights dim between segments, micro moments of recalibration that keep the emotional tide from rising too high. And colleagues have often noticed that while others rush or carry tension visibly, Al moves with a deliberate calm, not because he is unaffected, but because he has learned how to carry weight without letting it consume him. Deborah, too, plays a quiet but vital role in this balance, not by offering solutions, but by offering presence, by knowing when to ask about his day and when to simply sit beside him in the evening without pressing for details, understanding that some stories are better released than retold. And their relationship has, over the years, become a safe harbor where vulnerability is allowed but not forced, where laughter is often used as a gentle counterweight to the heaviness of the world. And it is in these shared moments, watching a familiar show, cooking a simple meal, reminiscing about earlier, less complicated days, that the emotional residue begins to dissolve, replaced by something steadier, something human. Yet there are days when the rituals feel less effective, when a story lingers longer than it should, when a face or a voice refuses to fade. And on those days, Al leans more heavily on the discipline he has built, extending his morning routine, taking an extra moment before stepping into the spotlight, reminding himself that resilience is not about being untouched, but about continuing despite being touched deeply. And this perspective has not only shaped his professional longevity, but has also given him a quiet sense of purpose, a belief that his role is not just to inform, but to connect, to bring clarity without carrying the full emotional burden of every story. For viewers in their later years, who have themselves witnessed decades of change, loss, and resilience, there is something profoundly relatable in this approach, a recognition that life inevitably brings exposure to pain, whether through personal experience or through the stories we absorb, but that survival often depends on the small, consistent rituals we build to protect our inner balance. And as Al steps in front of the camera each morning, offering the world his familiar warmth and steady voice, what the audience sees is only the final layer of a much deeper process, one that began hours earlier in the quiet stillness of his home, in the shared silence with Deborah, in the mindful separation of self from story, and in the enduring belief that even in a world filled with difficult news, it is still possible to meet each day with grace, composure, and a heart that remains open without being overwhelmed.